What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Cloud Slayer channel. I hope you guys are doing well. It's going to be another reaction video. This one's going to be the diabolical history of the comfort women of World War II. I haven't even looked into it yet, but I did want to react to it. So for sure, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button for a day in history. I'll add the channel down in the description below, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's jump into this anyways. So if you guys, as usual, if you guys like this video, please hit that like and subscribe button. I do appreciate it. So
welcome to a day in history. Before we begin today's video, we want to tell you that it contains descriptions of sexual abuse and servitude. We have tried to keep these descriptions as acceptable as possible, but there is some graphic detail in what you're about to hear. There have sadly been many wars since the end of World War II. We are currently watching on TV, on the internet and on social media, yet another brutal war being fought, this time in Ukraine. War can bring out the best in people, but unfortunately it also brings out the worst.
It's almost like a yin-yang, you know, if there's going to be good, there's also going to be bad.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, more than any recent conflict, has allowed us, unfortunately, to see the brutal nature of war. For historians, the conflict has brought to life the tragedies of World War II in our new century. Mass killings, indiscriminate shelling, and the targeting of civilians, torture, filtration camps, the kidnapping of Ukrainian children to be raised in Russia as Russians, and rape of old women, young girls and boys, and wives in front of their husbands.
That's sick, man. But it's true, you know, especially in the time of war.
Most of these crimes exist wherever conflict exists. But in Europe, with its tremendous stockpiles of modern weapons and its seemingly omnipresent cameras, we are seeing much of what is occurring firsthand. For World War II historians, the war in Ukraine answers the oft-posed question, what was World War II like? And the atrocities seem to make what happened some 80 years ago all the more real. One of the most tragic stories of World War II is that of the comfort women, a polite name for the forced kidnapping or coercion of women and girls by the Japanese army to comfort their soldiers. As in many war crimes cases, comfort is a euphemism, for this was just a polite term for sexual slavery on a mass scale. Though records exist in
They did it to their own women, eh?
Japan, China, Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Papua New Guinea, they are partial and only tell part of the story that Japan, to this day, is reluctant to talk about openly. However, it should be said that over the last 2 decades, they have made a greater effort to both admit their army's guilt, apologize, and make some restitution, though many of the surviving
Oh, that's just how their countries were at that time, you know? There's not much you could do about that.
Comfort women believe it was not enough.
Yeah, I mean, they have to live with that till the end of time, you know? Sad, but
has gone by, and most of the victims of this atrocity have passed on, but their memory remains in the national identity of countries occupied by Japan during World War II. It's not just that the children of the comfort women are well into their old age now as well. It's that very few comfort women were able to have children after the years of sexual abuse they endured.
I'm sure, like, when you contract like a STD and all that kind of stuff, it takes a toll on reproductive organs too, you know. Can't have kids, or, you know, it's fucked up, dude. If you got like the clap and stuff, it decreases your chance they having like children and stuff like that as well. I'm sure there was a lot more than just the clap going on back then, you know.
Physically, they had been made sterile, not intentionally, but from repeated punishing abuse. Mentally, many victims could not even fathom letting a man touch them again after what they had been through. Among the many things taken from these women was the common dream of having children and grandchildren. It's estimated that nearly 500,000 women were taken from their homes to service Japanese troops during the war. Most of the women taken were poor and uneducated.
Probably like family debts and stuff too, you know? No choice, though. No choice. There was no choice. Probably they take people with debts too.
Some were taken by force, literally right off the street. Some were girls who had not yet had their first period. A surprising number were lured into captivity with promises of a good-paying job elsewhere, maybe in the nearest big city, maybe in Japan. The Japanese military secret police committed many of these crimes. Sadly, many women and girls were taken by their own countrymen. Oftentimes, these were criminal gangs. Other times, groups of men hired themselves out as contractors to the Japanese, guaranteeing them a certain number of girls for a certain amount of money. Some families unwittingly sent their daughters and sisters away, thinking they might have a better future elsewhere.
Especially if they're in poverty and stuff like that, you know? Easy to lie to them, or even if they gave them money for their children, you know? That's sometimes to them back then, or even in the country, I suppose, that, you know, hey, man, it's got to think about every other mouth I got to feed and stuff like that.
One of the most unusual things about the taking of comfort women is that many were Japanese. The Japanese government in the late 1930s and 40s was fascist through and through and tried to model its attitudes on what it thought was the hyper-masculine culture of the samurai. The horrific seizure of comfort women had less to do with the subjugation and use of foreign populations for Japanese ends, and was more of a war on women. The Japanese word for comfort woman is weianfu, or comforting, consoling woman. This is hardly what it was for the women involved. Still, for historical accuracy, a small number of especially attractive women were the sole property of high-ranking Japanese officers and officials, and could possibly enjoy some of the better things in life, as long as they pleased their boss. Apart from the bureaucratic doublespeak, comfort women were called by other names by the Japanese, which indicated their true feelings towards their captives, Japanese, Asian, and in many cases, European. These European women were taken prisoner when the Japanese seized former European colonies in Asia. The degrading words used were public toilet, depositories, and on official lists as units of war supplies. It should
It's crazy, you know? Calling them shit like that.
not surprise you that many of these women and girls died while in captivity. Hunger, disease, beatings, hemorrhaging, shootings for disobedience, and more were all causes of death among these unfortunate women. Frequently, comfort women on death's door were forced out of what little shelter they had and were left to fend for themselves, often in a foreign land, but most of them died before that became an actual situation. There were many cases, especially...
That's crazy, you know? Can't imagine going through that shit, especially the life that I kind of lived. You know what I mean?
in the Philippines, where many women and young girls who were taken were forced to pay for their own medical care should they contract a social disease. But of course, they had no money. They weren't paid for their services. You might be able to guess how bills were paid.
Just sex.
The intent behind the comfort woman idea was to reduce the number of public rapes the Japanese committed in the conquered lands. Not because they were concerned with the moral implications or the women who were victimized.
We lower it by making them slaves.
No, it was only that politicians and officers realized that the public or barely concealed rapes of women were causing unrest in the occupied territories. By secreting women away, this was hoped to be avoided. Another reason for the establishment of comfort stations, as the places where women were kept were called, was to lessen the rates of venereal disease among Japanese troops. This may have worked for a short time, but as the US Navy began to destroy Japan's merchant fleet, condoms and medicine ran in very short supply. In many cases, comfort women were forced to rinse used condoms and use them again.
Jesus.
Obviously, many Japanese soldiers did not like to use condoms and risked disease. The end result from late 1943 onward was that venereal disease rates were higher than before the comfort women were subjugated.
Well, yeah, especially if they don't want to use condoms, especially if you just gotta clean it out, because just cleaning those condoms ain't gonna get rid of a disease, you know. And I don't know. That's some sketchy shit. It's fucked up. It's beyond sketchy. It's fucked up.
The excellent but brutal movie Paradise Road, 1997, depicts the lives of a group of captured European and Indonesian women on Sumatra during World War II. After suffering enough as a prisoner, one of the women decides to take the Japanese up on their offer of working in the officers' quarters. Unlike many of the women abused by the Japanese, she is aware of what they want her to do. Only she thinks it will be only for the commanding officer. She gets pretty dresses and lives in a nice house, but the officer beats her and, what's more, invites his comrades to get to know her. The next time the other women see her, only a short time later, she doesn't recognize them, and her eyes stare blankly out of her bruised face. This was likely the case for 99% of the women forced into sexual slavery.
This fucking beat so bad that you're traumatized, you know? You're kind of out of reality in that point, you know? When people break your will to live.
But what's for sure is that most women did not live in nice houses with new pretty dresses. Instead, most kept the clothes they were taken in, or perhaps had brought a small suitcase for the new office or factory job they thought they were going to. When these clothes became ragged, the women and girls might have been given something to wear that had been worn by a now deceased friend or a gunny sack type shift, sometimes made out of rough burlap. That newly deceased friend may have died from disease or beating, or, being quite ill, might likely have been shot. On some occasions, the Japanese authorities took...
It's rugged shit, man. Just imagine, it could have been like your best friend or something. You just get their clothes, or somebody that you got taken with from your village or something.
Action against a soldier who had shot or beaten a woman or girl to death. Most of the time, this punishment came in either a simple admonishment or perhaps a reduction in rank. There are only a handful of instances where Japanese soldiers were jailed for a short time. For some soldiers accused or proven to have killed one of the comfort women, the most common punishment seems to have been transferring back to Japan.
That's a tough punishment. Fucking, that's fucked up.
Is, if any punishment took place at all. If the clothes we described sound terrible, think about this. Many comfort stations, as the places where the imprisoned women and girls were kept were called, were right behind the front lines. This occurred mainly in China, where battles of one size or another happened continuously throughout the war, and in the Pacific. There are quite a few pictures of British or Australian soldiers speaking with liberated girls about their experience and providing medical care. This occurred mainly on Papua New Guinea, where a large number of Papuan Japanese women were sexually tortured. These were the daughters of Japanese businessmen who had worked on the large island before the war. Most, but not all, of these men went home to Japan, forgetting, or perhaps not even knowing, they had a daughter.
That's crazy. You just forget, or you just don't know. Well, I suppose back at that time you probably didn't know. Maybe the white wife or mistress didn't even tell them or whatever. Especially if they were rich, they could have had multiple partners. So,
one of the most infamous incidents of the US-Japanese War in the Pacific happened during the American invasion of the Japanese colony of Saipan. At the end of the battle, Japanese troops and civilians, many of whom had been forced to join the retreat by the Japanese army, were pinned on a narrow stretch of land. In front of them were the US Marines, who many Japanese thought were cannibals and baby killers from the insane propaganda put out by the Japanese government. Though many of those who elected to jump, sometimes with the babies in their arms, did so of their own volition, many did not. Among these were many comfort women. Some women believed the Japanese propaganda and jumped out of pure, unreasoning fear.
If they were poor and uneducated, I guess they would. You know, just believe the people that are still abusing you and stuff like that. You know, they can make you believe anything.
Others were prodded by Japanese bayonets. Others who refused to go had grenades exploded in their hiding places by Japanese soldiers bent on suicide and killing as many of them as possible. Much of the action on the infamous Suicide Cliffs.
That's fucking holy crap, man! Just blow somebody up with a grenade, man. And then these guys think they're gonna go to like some kind of heaven or something, you know? Fucking blowing your own people up.
Of Saipan was filmed by marine photographers some distance away. Though women and girls were taken in sizable numbers from all the nations mentioned at the start of this video, it's estimated that some 80% of all comfort women came from Korea, a Japanese possession since 1896. After the war, one of them, Kim Hak-sun, gave the following account of just part of her experience. When I was 17 years old, the Japanese soldiers came along in a truck, beat us, and then dragged us into the back. I was told, if I were drafted, I could earn lots of money in a textile factory. The first day, I was raped, and the rapes never stopped. I was born a woman, but never lived as a woman. I feel sick when I come close to a man. Not just Japanese men, but all men, even my own husband who saved me from the brothel. I shiver whenever I see a Japanese flag. Why should I feel ashamed? I don't have to feel ashamed. She also told of Kim being raped 30 to 40 times a day, every day of the year, during her time as a comfort woman.
Man, that's fucked up, man. 30 to 40 times a day. Just fucking... These people are just fucking them, man. Piece of shit, you know? What do? You know, that was made acceptable, you know?
As you might imagine, this caused intense physical pain and damage. The psychological and emotional damage also never went away. When the war ended, many survivors returned home and never spoke about their experiences to anyone. Many did not even return home, unable to face their families after their experience. It was not until the 1980s that enough comfort women, aided in part by the women's movement of the 1960s and onward, plus their maturity and sense of justice denied, began to protest for reparations and admissions of guilt from the Japanese government. Neither came easy. Many years passed before Japan agreed to pay any money to survivors, and very little. Finally, additional pressure, not only from the survivors, but from their few children and grandchildren, as well as Japan's enemies during the war, caused Japan to issue apologies and pay more significant amounts of reparations. However, most of these went to organizations formed to help survivors, and most survivors never saw any of this money. It's believed that only a few dozen comfort women are still alive, but women's rights organizations and others have put increased pressure on the Japanese to do the right thing, even all these years later. In Korea,
as they
a famous
should,
statue called Peace was placed in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, South Korea, depicting a comfort woman asking for justice. Similar statues outside Japanese embassies and consulates were soon erected in many places occupied by the Japanese, including a number in the United States. The Japanese government has repeatedly asked for these statues to be taken down.
No, fuck that. Oh man, what did I do?
Most remain standing today. Thank you for watching our presentation on this tragic and important...
Good, they should keep it up. That's a monumental thing in history. I don't think we should be tearing down statues, especially just because we disagree with them. A lot of them are reminders of history, things that had passed, you know what I mean? Whether they're good or bad. Gotta keep them there, or else they could repeat themselves. I mean, they'll repeat themselves when people stop listening to history, which is a common occurrence because, you know, you got to live in the now. I understand that, but, you know, you still got to listen to your history and stuff like that. So, but if you guys, like I said, if you guys like these guys, hit that like, subscribe button. A Day in History. I'm going to have the description down below. And I hope you guys have a great night, and peace.